Welcome back. My name is Ivica Cartello. We continue to learn about my first React application. Here is a script. What we have here, it is app 9. We have two folders, public and src, like source and like public. In public, for us, interesting is index.html. It is home page. It is a single page in public. It is single page in all React application with extension .html. We need that extension. Web function, web must have, web pages, web application must have index.html, because browser and web browser and web server communicate by that. It is home page by browser, and of course calling HTML, index.html is first called, and look at code. Look at code. It is doc type, head. It is HTML. HTML head. You look at for responsive design, very important. And in body, this element, a div id equal root, that HTML element would be like mirror in the source of the page. We will see only div id equal root, but on the screen, in help of that div, we will see complete code of our what produce React. Code what produce React will not be visible. Will not be visible in source. Okay, let's go to C. Source, yeah, look at. We don't see, it is div id root, and there is no HTML from React application. React application produce process. After process, React application, after process, JavaScript in React application, result of that processing is HTML, but that HTML is not visible in source of that web page, but it is visible here. F12, and here it is element, div id root, div, you look at complete, div, and it is complete HTML visible here. It is complete div ID root, header, image. It is our logo SVG. Edit code and save to reload. Uplink, here it is validate HTML, complete HTML. But in source we see only div ID root, and in any size of React application we will see only this index.html, only this HTML. We will see only in source only this HTML of index.html. Because of that, we call React application, this kind of application we call another JavaScript application. In front-end development we call single page application. Single page application. Okay. First called when we find address of our of this application, when we open it, first would be called index.html. After that, index.js. Index.js calling React DOM.render, calling method render, and that we need rendering app, web component app, web component app. Where is that web component? And result of React of render would be placed in a document dot get element by ID. It is property of it is a method of object document. Document is window. It is our web page. In that window, our web page. In our web page, dot get element by ID is a method. Root. Root is argument, parameter of method get element by ID. In element, HTML element, root. It means in a div ID equal root. And rendering, result of rendering, or rendering is, we can call it processing of JavaScript. That result would be HTML and would be placed in document get element by ID. It would be access. It would be access in div ID equal root. Result of rendering is this. It is HTML result of rendering. This HTML about we speaking before. And it is finished, and we see in our screen, we see this in web browser. And one more thing. Yeah, where is that JavaScript what produce HTML? Here it is, app.js. It means that first calling index HTML, after that index.js in a source folder, and after that index.js calling web component or React component app. It is self-closing HTML element. But the difference between HTML and HTML from React is capital letter. First letter is capital, IPP. It is not in HTML. And it is component. It is component, or it is object, React object, self-closed. It is self-closed. There is no to tag. It is self-closed web component, React component. Name is app, and it is that moment when calling. It is call for this file app.js. Here it is. Function app, and that is name app, is name of React component. Function app is component, is React component. In file app.css, in JS, in this file, there is one component, and that component is right in JavaScript extension JSX, JavaScript extension language, programming language. And this extension is because of HTML, what we writing type inside of that function. JSX is a mix of JavaScript and HTML. Okay. On the beginning of app.js, we must import what we need. We need logo.svg and import, give name logo, what we want name is logo, from that file. And import app.css. It is app.css. Cascade style, cascade CSS. It is for formatting of our web HTML element. After that, function. This is function. And export default app semicolon. Export default means that we can import that page if we need that, or we can call that without export to default app. We can call in index. You look at index calling app component, but without export default app, it will be impossible. Okay, that is function component. Inside function component, there is a keyword function, name of function. It is name of function. bracket, empty, inside bracket there is no parameter of function, and curly bracket is body of every function, and in that curly bracket is our script. First of all, keyword return, and in brackets what would be return? Semicolon. Semicolon. All that in return, all return from brackets to brackets and semicolon, it is as one statement, as one JavaScript statement. We, after every JavaScript statement, we type semicolon. Okay. All that inside it is HTML. Look, HTML. I like to write class without a name, but because I have no problem. It is till now. When I would have a problem, I can stop. And it is one reason. Second reason is maybe would be a rule that it is possible write only class without name. But why beginning writing class name React in start and still now is still now want to class name, not class name, because class is a key word in JavaScript, and that would be some fourth. Class name is secure, and I recommend you write class name. But of course, return means that it will be processed, all will be processed, and from this, after processing, that JScript.js X JavaScript extension, we will have validate HTML. Validate HTML. For example, instead of class name, we will have class, and instead of this logo in curly bracket, we will have a path. Here it is. Image, src, source, static media logo. It is instead of curly bracket logo. Class, here is class, not class name. It is validate HTML code. It's all, that's all. But I will say something else. Different between JavaScript frameworks, JavaScript library. Officially, React is a JavaScript library. It is writing on officially a web page of React. But there is element of framework also, and somebody call it framework, but it is as this. I work in one, maybe 2 years in React and Angular. In React maybe 1 year, in Angular 1 year before that, and Angular is framework. I work and I learn a lot of courses and look at a lot of courses, and I have not big difference between React and Angular, etc. And Angular is a strictly framework, and React is officially on the web page, it is library. But I have big difference between the most known library. It is jQuery. jQuery library. It is JavaScript library jQuery. There is a big difference between jQuery library, what is known officially, known library, never ever anybody's call it framework. jQuery, and I have big difference between jQuery library and React library, and in that compare, React is framework when I compare it with jQuery. Okay, but it is not important in that moment for your learning. In your prax, in your experiment prax, and a lot of learning and working, you will have your opinion about that. And for the end of this video, I want to say this. Difference between PHP application. PHP application is server, dynamic server content, and PHP on server produce web pages and send that web pages to browser. After that, any connections and between browser and server is finished, and when we click again we have processing, PHP processing data and produce new web page, send web server send it to browser. It is a web server, but web server and web client communication before JavaScript server. Now we have JavaScript server. JavaScript from the beginning is part of the web browser and processing on web browser. JavaScript is on our client computer and in web browser, and always processing in web browser. But in last time we have JavaScript server, Node server, JavaScript server, Node package, Node software. And when we have JavaScript server, that moment we have Angular framework, we have front-end frameworks, front-end library, front-end frameworks and library, JavaScript frameworks and library what lay on the JavaScript server, JavaScript web server. JavaScript server, it is one layer on hypertext transfer protocol. That web browser, web server, as we know that, have one layer up that for JavaScript server. And this moment when we look at, we start it with npm start order command, and npm start starting server, and we look at our web application, my first React application. We look on the JavaScript server, and the browser and JavaScript server communicate as this. When we call some address, first address, in our React application, complete React application, complete this React application, go to web browser. From Node server, from JavaScript server, complete JavaScript application, it means React concretely application, complete transfer to web browser, to client computer. Because of that, loading, first time loading, JavaScript React application, first time loading is slow, can be very slow. But after that is very, very fast. Because of that, it is very important for user experience. User experience now have new experience. It is fast loading every page, fast loading pages in React application, fast loading in React application. Because of that, what complete application coming on our browser and processing in our browser. Every our click means processing in JavaScript React application, and that React application always running, don't stop. They running on our computer, and it is fast as desktop application. Desktop applications are, for example, Word, Excel, etc. When we have instant, immediately when we type something, we immediately see that characters on the screen, and every hour click in Word, Excel, there is no delay. Immediately we see on screen what must happen. The same is JavaScript, and JavaScript, when JavaScript is on our React application is on our computer, in this concretely, here is no data. We have only one HTML page, app.js. But in the next example, we will have database. But database, at first, we will have database in JSON format. And that JSON format, together with the React application, will coming on browser, and every changes in our view would access for new data, and that data would be on our computer. It will be very, very fast as desktop application, and that fast loading is something what today user experience used like, and it is standard for user experience. Some standard, and we cannot back from that. But when data is not in JSON format but in other some kind of database, we will see what kind of database on JavaScript server. Of course, we must wait that data coming, but all HTML template will be fast because template is on our computer. But data, we must waiting only for data. But in PHP application, we must wait for complete page. Always, in every transaction, in every click, we must waiting complete page. Not only data, but complete page. But here in JavaScript, we're waiting for data from JavaScript server, Node server. I will experiment in this school. Experiment a lot of with JSON format and possibility and simplicity with JSON format is excellent, and I find borders limit possibility of using JSON format instead of other database, just because of simplicity and JSON format coming on browser site, and it is very fast opening. Thank you for watching this video.